Hello, Chalk Dusters. Katie here and DTM.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much for coming back again to listen to our podcast about WTA tennis. And DTM is going to introduce this week.
Yes, what we're looking at this week, we're going to review the action from the week just gone in Doha, the Qatar Technologies Open, a WTA 1000 event. We'll go through the results from there and who impressed and who maybe less so. Then we're going to look at the schedule and players beginning to get tired and the impact of playing week after week on the tour. What is the reality of that? How do players navigate it? And the big talk leading into this week in Dubai is someone who's having a very light schedule at the moment is the world number one Arena Sabalenka. So just played 2 events in 2026, and we're going to look and compare her schedule with those a bit lower down in the rankings. So we're going to look at tiredness and the schedule. How many weeks did you used to work, Katie, full time before you'd like to take a day off work?
Well, reality and what I would like to have done was probably quite different. But certainly when I was working corporate, definitely did 48 weeks a year.
Yes, and even as teachers, much maligned sometimes for holidays are concerned, we would do at least 5 or 6 weeks on the trot before we had a break.
Bless you. It sounded quite easy as you put it.
And then we're going to go through who's shot up the rankings, who's had a reset, who's been the player of the week. And I want to talk a little bit about patterns of play to watch out for all the listeners out there when you're watching the next match. What are the patterns of play? What are the first opportunities to get ahead in the point? We're just going to mention 3 or 4 patterns of play to watch out for and why some players are possibly doing better than others around those patterns of play.
And would patterns of play be what I would call tactics or strategies?
Exactly. What the coaches behind the scenes are encouraging them to do and commit to throughout the match. So they'll talk about players' weakness, and I'll mention a couple of areas where I think someone like Rybakina can be exposed, and that'll come up this week when we review the action from Doha because she lost. And finally, we're just going to look ahead to this coming week in Dubai, the draws out, and see where the exciting matches may be and who might progress further than others. So that's this week's show.
Lovely. Well, let's get into the meat of it.
Okay, so we had the 2 M's in the final today in Qatar. Karolina Muchova plays Victoria Mboko in the final. Now, someone keeps pushing Mboko.
Hello. I know I'm not meant to be the person who's good at tennis here, but I have been very much bigging up Mboko ever since she came on the scene, really. I think she's great. She's got real grit.
Yes, and she's made the final. And of course, only a couple of days ago, she caused the big shock of the week by taking out the favourite for the event, Elena Rybakina, after her win in Australia. And Mboko stepped onto court, and it was a real long match, three-set match. And Mboko, from being a breakdown in the 3rd set, recovered from 4-3 down and broke Rybakina's serve twice to come out the winner. And then she took out Ostapenko in the semi-final to play Muchova in the final and was the favourite going into the final. But as we now know, the Czech won her first title for over 6 years. Karolina Muchova is just outside the top 10. Her highest ever ranking is 8 in the world, but she's one of those players that's often forgotten, but always gets to latter stages of events. But today she actually got the glory of the title.
Well done her.
Other things that happened this week, well, we have to go right back to the beginning, and we talked about Emma Raducanu and others getting on the plane and hot-footing it across to Qatar from places like Transylvania.
If you were tuned in last week, I gave quite a detailed schedule of how you would have to, what traveling you would have to do and how long it would take you and how you would have to have breakfast in the cab, frankly, to get from one tournament to the next. And Raducanu at that stage was not feeling on tip-top health form already. So I was just feeling like she needed a duvet day.
Well, she went on that plane.
She did.
She turned out in the first round. She stormed the first set against Colombian Osorio and was looking good. And then Osorio came back in the second set. And at the start of the third set, 2 games in, Raducanu retired.
I think her paracetamol probably wearing off.
Yes, it's a bit confusing. I think if you're ill, you're ill.
There is that.
But I think for the listener's benefit, without trying to draw any wider conclusions, I suspect sometimes players go to events, not just for the tennis, they have other obligations. And I cannot believe Raducanu went just purely for the tennis, because if she wasn't totally fit, she's not going to do herself justice on court.
And those obligations would be around sponsors and around side hustle deals.
Yes, and players' events for the sponsors in the evening, they have obligations to the WTA, they have dinners, engagements, etc. So having players to have photos with at those events is important. And I expect she had to go and probably felt that she was in the Middle East, she was committing to Dubai the week after, so she was traveling there anyway. So
then she could get the rest of her recovery done from whatever illness she had, or her tiredness at least. She could get her recovery done in the same country,
in the same location, and acclimatizing to the conditions in the Middle East. So some sense in it, but in terms of her performance on the court, I think that's what a lot of the general public look at and can be critical of her. Whereas actually, when you look at the whole package and what's involved in her working life, it probably made sense.
But it'll be a bit of a yo-yo then, because some of them, as I think you mentioned earlier, some of them she will be fresh as a daisy when they all turn up in Dubai, whereas the ones who play, Muchova, Mboko, they'll be exhausted.
Yes, and I said last week that I did get right, if you like, was I would be very surprised if Rybakina won, was how I stated it, because she'd had all this media, all the obligations that come having won a Grand Slam. And that just takes a lot out of a player, even though it's not physically on the court, it's tiring outside of the court. She's having to smile all the time, wear all the clothes that are not her normal training kit, etc., that go with all those photographs, and it's tiring. And I think I said she'd be happy to get to the quarterfinals, match her result from last year, not lose any points, and a bit like Raducanu from her position, having a few days off before Dubai worked for her. I don't think she lost deliberately. She tried her hardest, but in terms of mentally, once it got close in that third set with Mboko, she didn't have enough to go again.
And as a total side issue, and I'm sure she will be focusing hugely on her tennis, but I was reading about her setting up her own ERA, Elena Rybakina agency. She set up her own sporting management agency, currently with a #1 tennis player as a client. And her name, bizarrely, is Elena Rybakina. Well, who would have thought it? So she's got herself a client, which is great. I'll be interested in client #2. Although word on the street is that the most likely is Mboko. Interesting.
Right, that is interesting.
So then and that started off in 2026, they're saying, and therefore, so she's been concentrating on a lot of things as well as tennis, as well as winning the AS.
I think she's also been listening to Chalk Dust.
Oh, well, definitely she's been listening to Chalk Dust in terms of her fashion sense, which you can see, obviously. They need to say our fashion sense. But one of the reasons stated, don't know how true it is, that she has set up her own agency is that she wanted more of her own ability to advocate and make her own choices on, for example, the type of clothes that Yone puts her in.
Oh.
Yes, and you will have noticed, DTM, because you've been well trained in this, that she's been wearing much more poppy, zingy colours, none of the laundry looks that she was wearing a day of. She's been wearing orange and blue and much more the type of things that the other players are wearing.
Yeah, she had colour all week this week.
And still your next, obviously, but she's got, because she's in her own agency now, she gets more the ability to choose.
Okay, so a lot going on in her world,
Yes.
off court, and someone who returned to action this week, a name that we haven't mentioned on the podcast at all in 2026 until now, is the Chinese number one, Qinwen Zheng, who returned to action and won a couple of matches until she faced Rybakina and pushed her to 3 sets before losing. And she showed signs of the form that made her one of the top 10 players in previous seasons, but she's been out with injury for a while. So she's back and she's playing again in Dubai. So that was good to see. But as we head on to thinking about why players get tired and their schedule, the last person to mention in terms of our review is Amanda Anisimova, because I actually thought she would have a good week, but sadly it didn't get past the first round because she retired. She was lying on her back at the side of the court, having her blood pressure taken, etc. And she shook hands with Pliskova, who gratefully received a walkover into round 2. So worrying times for Amanda Anisimova, whether that was climatizing, whether that was tactical, whether she was genuinely ill. I'm sure
all that travel
could have been a combination. It was unlikely that it was tactical because she was defending 1,000 points. So, as we'll see in the rankings, unfortunately, those 1,000 points weren't defended and they'd come off her ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So, worth watching out for Anisimova this week, and hopefully she'll be feeling better and actually do herself justice.
Go, Amanda.
So that kind of takes us on to tiredness and the schedule. So only a few days ago, just before the cutoff for Dubai, 2 big names, if not the biggest, numbers 1 and 2 in the world, Aryna Sabalenka and Iga Swiatek, both at the invisible door of Dubai from further afield and said, "I'm not coming." Now we know Aryna Sabalenka did that probably nearly 2 weeks ago now in advance of Doha and the first WTA 1000 event for the Middle East swing, and she's done it with the second one as well.
So she hasn't been in the Middle East?
She's not travelled to the Middle East, full stop.
Okay, and that will leave her having done none of the Middle East swing.
That's right, she won't have gone at all.
She'll hit the courts again in America.
That's right, Miami, if she turns out. And I suspect that when we look at the scheduling and the decisions that players make, those in the top echelons of the game have the luxury of making decisions which others can't make, and they have the luxury of greater choice. And Iga Swiatek also took that choice, having lost to Sakari in Qatar this last week, having been in a winning position, 6-2 up, 4 all, break points, so literally 5 points from winning. She lost again, and she's looking more and more vulnerable on anything that's quicker than quite a slow court. Whether she was sulking, whether she would have come on to Dubai if she'd won this week, who knows? But she says, "That's it, I'm changing my schedule and I'm not coming." She's taking advantage of one of her 4 mulligans and saying, "I'm just not coming now."
Okay.
So let's do a deep dive on comparing 2 players that we've heard about quite a lot. So Aryna Sabalenka, how many times, Katie, do you think Aryna Sabalenka has played this year?
Well, not very many. She hasn't been in the Middle East at all, and she played until she got to the final of the Australian Open.
Right. She played 1 warm-up event before the Australian Open in Brisbane and 1 the title there, and then she went on to the Australian Open and got all the way to the final, as we know. So she's only played twice. So let's compare her schedule as we approach, the middle of February. Here we are on Valentine's Day.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you. Aryna Sabalenka has played just twice. Alexandra Ayala, someone that is big news, especially in the Philippines. Shout out to all our Filipino listeners. She's playing her 6th event tomorrow. She starts her 6th event in Dubai.
She is a pocket rocket.
Well, she's young, I'll give her that. But
and enthusiastic.
That's a lot of events. So does playing a lot breed success? Or has Sabalenka's approach reaped as much, if not more, reward? Now, you can argue, okay, Aryna Sabalenka is ranked number 1 in the world. Alexandra Ayala has sort of just broken into the top 50. She's in the 40s at the moment. But it's still interesting. So how many matches do you think they've won?
You're going to tell me. I know you are.
I am. So Aryna Sabalenka, in her 2 events, has won 11 matches. Ayala's coming up to her 6th event, and in the 5 events she's completed, she's won 7 matches so far. So Sabalenka has earned or defended or earned 1,800 ranking points or thereabouts to the nearest 100, and Ayala's on about 250 points.
You see, this is where I always come in with slightly left field view. They've got WTA points thereafter. They've got prize money thereafter. They've got sponsorship money, obviously. But you see, I'd love to know which one of them has gained more followers in the last 3 weeks or this year, 7 weeks, 6 weeks, because I would hazard a guess that Ayala has got loads more followers because she's so well loved. As we discussed last week, and I think we've talked about it, everywhere she goes is a home match because the Filipino crowd just gather around her and cheer for her as if she's playing at her own, in the middle of her own park at home, and she's huge on socials.
Yes, so her approach and strategy isn't just about the tennis.
I think none of their approaches is just about the tennis when they're young, the youngsters these days.
But in terms of the tennis, the higher you're ranked, the more advantages you have because you can build in greater rest periods and therefore be at your peak or peak more through the season because you've had the rest periods in between. So each time you turn out, it's almost like a fresh mini season about to start again.
Well rested.
I think Aryna Sabalenka gets, like we talked about the peak age between 24 and 28 years of age. She's coming towards the end of that 4-year period. She's just interested in winning the biggest events, the things that will create her history when she's retired in terms of her career. So she's got to play 4 warm-up events for the big 4 Grand Slams. So that makes 8 in total. And she'll play, I think, a handful. Last year she played 16 events, so she played another 8 events in total. I think this year she'll play less than that. So she'll play maybe 5 or 6 in addition to give her around 14 events for the year. And they're probably in favoured locations, places she likes to go.
And places possibly that are near to each other. So she's, missed out a whole geography this last few weeks, and then she'll hit the Americas, and then she'll hit Europe.
To give a third perspective on this, Sonay Kartal, who is a similar player to Ayala in terms of ranking, ranked between 50 and 60 in the world. She's played a lot as well. She's just played all 3 Middle East events, and she's out of Dubai because she's lost in qualifying. Her results through the Middle Eastern swing, having played 3 weeks running, have deteriorated. Her results have got worse at each event. So she qualified for the first event in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi and got to the quarterfinals, which is a great return for her. She then went across to Qatar, which, as we know, is quite close, so short journeys in terms of travel time, got back on the court again, had to qualify, won 2 qualifying matches, got through to the first round, then lost a long 3-set match to Magda Linette, who's a long experienced player, top 30 in her best days, but a match I think Kartal would have won if she'd been totally fresh. Gone hot-footed across to Dubai, first round of qualifying, got through, but lost in the second round of qualifying to Sasnovic, who is a lower ranked player, and she's not qualified, and she didn't get a lucky loser spot. So that's her done in the Middle East. Okay, so quite a few tied players. I would be tempted to mention, for me, as a professional tennis player, I'd rather you didn't walk onto court if you know you're absolutely shattered, you're mentally not able to give anywhere near your best. I'd rather you didn't even go onto the court. Time and time again, I see players who play really well when they're fresh, or the week before, the first tournament of the swing, Middle Eastern swing, and then 2 weeks later, they're just not, it's just not what I would call professional standards. They would say it's the schedule's fault, it's the WTA pushing us to play far too much tennis, and we have to turn up to take the prize money that we feel we're owed because we've got a ranking that means for this season, all our hard work over the last 15 years from being a tiny tot to getting on to the professional circuit feed into this moment. So if we want to pick and choose when we let ourselves go a bit on court and lose as quickly as possible, that's okay. I don't know what you think.
I think that for every winner, you need a loser, and a loser is not a very trendy word to say, but there is a loser in every tennis match. In order to have a winner, there has to be a loser, and therefore you need what we used to call the cannon fodder. But I know the point that you're making is not that, is it? The point you're making is that somebody who isn't cannon fodder, who could play better, sometimes doesn't by choice.
Yes, I think there's a lot of players who would look at fellow professionals who are a bit lower down in the rankings, who haven't played every week, who are scrambling around for points in lower points events, or sitting out a week because there isn't an event to play. Watch fellow players, and think that's not acceptable. And I wish there was some kind of consequence or more meaningful relationship between the tour and the players to allow them to not get into that situation. And there are different ways of doing that. But I think the players and the likes of Sabalenka this week, and it being in the media, in the tennis media, talking about the schedule, will slowly have an effect.
Well, we'll watch that as the weeks go by.
Okay, so we're now going to look at patterns of play and what to watch out for. So when you're watching a match, Mboko at the moment against Rybakina this week, what were you thinking in terms of, is Mboko getting on top of Rybakina? Was it the score that was telling you that? And you were thinking, well, Mboko's won the first set, so I feel like she's on top. How do you look at the match and decide if your chosen player is doing well?
Well, with Mboko, one of the reasons I think she's great is that she's got such grit. And so I think her determination is not deflated in any way by being on the wrong end of the score. That's how I feel about her. If you're listening, I hope you are. Well done. I think there are some really good stats that show also that players can. If you're at 1-1, it's very even-handed as to who wins the third set. And we talked about that last week or a week before, I think. And so she's right not to be downhearted by that. So I think we've also talked a little bit about if you win the first point, it's very unlikely for any players to win 3 points on the trot. So the 15 love is really important. Otherwise, I tend to look at your face and see what I think.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about each point before we even start a point. What we're looking for is which player is going to take advantage of the first opportunity to get ahead in the point. Because if you can get ahead in the point, you're likely to win the point. In the modern game, the rackets hit the ball so much harder than when we played as children with a wooden racket.
Attached to the racket.
So the speed of the ball over the net, it's impossible for a player to have such fitness that they can scramble backwards and forwards continually and retrieve everything. The speed of the ball travels across the net means that if you get ahead in the point, you're going to be able to put the ball away when the player's out of court. So the first opportunity to do that is when you're serving your first serves. The first servers, we've talked about both serves, but the first serve is the server's opportunity to get ahead in the point. If a professional tennis player, certainly inside the top 50 players, gets their first serve in play having hit their spot. So they're not just aiming it in the box
It's not random.
as we might do at the club. They're aiming for a spot, and they'll be hitting the corner of the box at speed. And first serves, it's 100 miles or more. The returner, which is obviously every other game, so when you're serving, it's the first serve. Get that in, you're heading the point. As the returner, if the server's then serving their second serve because they've missed the first serve, that's their first opportunity to get ahead in the point. So what I look for when I'm watching a tennis match is who's getting ahead in the points against what I just said, if that makes sense. So if Rybakina gets her first serve in against Mboko, is Mboko making any inroads into that type of point? Equally, when it comes to returning the second serve, is anyone being too passive? So you will hear some players berate themselves. Coco Gauff is a player who, when she lost to Svitolina in the Australian Open, she came off court and she said, I was just too passive. And it's because that first opportunity of getting ahead in the point when she was returning Svitolina's serve, she wasn't doing enough.
Not aggressive, not fighted.
And you'll see this more and more, especially with players with weaker second serves. Does the opponent break their serve? 33% of the time, close to 50% of the time. Rybakina doesn't have a weak serve. It's the best serve in the game. Players will not break her serve anywhere near a third half.
And when you're saying a third to a half or breaking her serve, you're talking about the point, you're talking about the game.
The game. Getting ahead in the point, if we get past the serve and the return, we're into a 3 or more shot rally, then it's different. Okay.
And then it's more even. We gradually forget who served. It's less important who served the point.
So then, in terms of patterns of play to watch out for, it's the difference between cross-court and down the line.
Right.
So I'm going to challenge your maths from your school days now. What's the difference between the diagonal across the court and the down the line? Not in terms of tennis, but just in terms of...
The hypotenuse.
Very good.
Thank you. You weren't expecting that, were you?
I wasn't. So one is a longer distance than the other. So
the squared of the other two parts or something like that, wasn't it?
You'll see the players hitting a lot more across the court when the rally's extended. They'll go forehand to forehand or backhand to backhand in terms of if they're both right-handed, like we've seen with Muchova and Mboko today. Cross-court, 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 cross-court. The opportunity to get ahead in the point or even win the point isn't cross-court, it's down the line.
Because cross-court, being longer, being the hypotenuse, thanks for the maths lesson, it means that they've got more time. Whereas if you're going down the line, if they're on the wrong side of that, if they're on the wrong side of the court for that line, then they haven't got time to get there.
But because it's a shorter distance, it requires the player, if they've been, let's just use a sort of general public term, if they've been whacking it,
that's a good time,
cross court, and then they go for it down the line with the same pace that they've just been doing cross court, it's likely to go out because it's slightly shorter distance. Okay, so this is where the change of direction and being able to change the pace of the shot is a skill that obviously the professionals have, but some players do it better than others. What you've got to factor in addition to that, is the height of the net going cross court as opposed to down the line. So it's kind of bad news both ways down the line, because the net is slightly higher on the straight line down the line near the trams, and the net is slightly higher than in the middle where the ball travels more in relation to the cross court. So you will see players sometimes talk about trying to hit either their backhand or their forehand down the line. That is their kind of money-making shot. And some players struggle with that more than others. And it's a shot that someone like Mboko, Iala, some of the young players that have really broken into the game, Andreeva, when they're confident, they hit that down the line shot really well. Another player this week who I really like, because she's got an amazing ground stroke game when it's on, is Anna Kalinskaya, who had a good win this week, beats Svitolina, but then came up against Muchova, who's a tricky player. What Muchova did was she just made her play one more ball, one more shot. But what she did, as well as making her play one more ball or one more shot, was she kept changing the pace. So if you hit the ball in terms of patterns of play, most of us will see other hitting topspin. It'll be a flatter topspin or a heavy topspin. Iga Swiatek hits a heavy topspin. Other players hit a much flatter shot like Kalinskaya, who I've just mentioned. But ultimately, that's going at a fast speed across the net. When they slice it and take the pace off it, it's a much slower speed. Or sometimes you'll hear commentators talking about a moon ball, which is a topspin lob shape, is just to give them time to get back into position. But the ability to change pace and go from harder hitting to then slower hitting and then harder hitting, some of the players don't have. Kalinskaya, not so good at it. She just likes to hit it hard and go for the winners. And when it comes off, it's devastating. But players know, in terms of the patterns of play, I'm going to do this and get to shot 5, shot 6, shot 7 in the rally, and then I'm going to become a very strong favourite. So today we saw Mboko struggle to break Muchova's serve. It was in the second set, 2-all in the midway through the second set, and suddenly you saw Mboko get ahead on return for the first time, and she stepped in, and every second serve, she was 3-4 yards inside the baseline, hitting the ball on the rise, so the ball's serve, hit the spot in the box, second serve, picked up, it's a slower speed than the first serve, and the ball's on the rise, and she's taking it on the forehand or double-handed backer, hitting it for a winner. Really important to watch out for those points, those features within a point to see if the player's getting on top.
And you were telling me about one match we were watching where you said, oh, for goodness sake, just keep the ball in play and the other one will make the mistake.
And if they hit an opponent's second serve into the net, that's a real pet hate of mine, because when you make a mistake, it should be out. It shouldn't be into the net. The net is the poorest mistake to make. If you go long by 2 or 3 inches, it's a bit like a golfer when he has a putt to win the Open. If he leaves the putt short, you'll hear people say never up, never in. If you hit the ball in the net at tennis, it's like leaving a putt short. If you get a putt past the hole, well, it had a chance.
These things happen.
If you hit the ball over the net, it goes out.
These things happen.
It had a chance, and it was the right play. Missed it. You will see what I call using a tennis brain, and I think this is a sort of final pattern of play to watch out for. I talked either in my blog or on the podcast before. Sabalenka didn't really use her tennis brain towards the end of that. Well, certainly in that third set, once she got 3-love ahead in the final in Australia against Rybakina, the last 6 or 7 games, her tennis brain stopped working. And I felt for a while that Rybakina she's vulnerable if she's brought into the net. If you give her a mid-court ball, whether it's off a second serve or a ground stroke, she's going to use the power of her ground strokes, and it could be past you. But if you keep the ball low, so this tall 6-foot player's got to get down to a low ball, and then her momentum's bringing her to the net where she doesn't want to be, then you've got a chance to expose her net play, and you've got a chance to bring in an error of a low bouncing ball. And Muchova, who beat her before the Australian Open, very good at that, low slices. And if you watch Mboko's match against Rybakina closely, there were a handful of key points where she did exactly that. And that's using her tennis brain. And I think there are some players that use their tennis brain even when the pressure's on and when it's close. And they think about what they should be doing and the tactics that the coaches have talked to them about, and committing to certain patterns of play, which will give them the best chance of winning.
Very good.
Okay. So should we do some ranking, surging and resetting?
Game, set and surge. Who's that, DTM?
So it's going to Marie Sakkari from Greece.
Yay, come on down.
Who has been as high as number 3 in the world, and certainly in the top 10 for quite a period. And then she nosedived. Slowly but surely, she got back towards the top 50. And this week, she got to the semi-finals, got a set ahead against Muchova, but lost in 3 sets. She lost in 3 sets, but that semi-final run in a WTA 1000 event meant that she shot back up over 300 points gained this week, and she's now 33 in the world, so very close to a seeding for the French Open in a few months' time. So it'd be interesting if her trajectory continues. But well done, Marie Sakkari.
Very good.
Also famous this year for her victory over Carlos Alcaraz in the 1-point slam.
Yes. take it well.
So, in terms of a reset,
Game, set, and reset.
well, doesn't sound a lot, but dropping just 2 places because of her 1,000 points that went with her retirement, Amanda Anisimova dropped from number 4 in the world to number 6. And surprising because Coco Gauff has gone back up to number 4, even though she lost. And there's someone I'm going to talk about in a second.
So Coco Gauff lost, but didn't lose as much as Anisimova, and therefore Coco Gauff went up.
Yeah, she didn't have any points to defend, so her loss didn't lose her any points. She didn't gain any points, but although it was a missed opportunity, the rankings worked in such a way that her position in terms of the rankings went up. So could talk a little bit about Coco Gauff in respect of Dubai. But you've been to Dubai a few times, so before I talk tennis, what's the weather and the heat going to do in Dubai? Because it looked quite hot.
Well, I don't know. February, it's going to be hotter than here in sunny Spain. But yeah, it'll be the same as the rest of the Middle East, I would imagine.
Okay, so the players should be used to it. Well, it's the second WTA 1000 event, and this week, Mira Andreeva is defending the title. So she has 1,000 points on the line, and she's an interesting player because she's capable of some amazing tennis, but she's also capable of some tears during the match, which we saw this week because she lost to Mboko after having match point. It went to 3 sets, then a tie break in the final set, and Andreeva she was crying in the final set.
I see her on her socials, and she just seems just such a sweet girl. She just seems very young and very sweet and not very toughened by the world, I think.
Yeah, she's just played tennis, hasn't she? So she's probably developing at a different rate to other teenagers.
Other teenagers, yes, but not other tennis players.
No.
But no, she just looks like a really lovely young lady, possibly not as tough as the others.
Well, with numbers 1 and 2 in the world not attending, as we've said, she has a chance to defend her title. She's in the bottom half, but she's drawn the same section as Mboko for the 3rd time already this year. So having played twice already, it's 1-1. If they both win one match, they'll be playing each other in Dubai, which will be an interesting watch.
It will, but then Mboko will be very tired.
She will, and I would be surprised if Mboko had another deep run, because as we keep saying, doing well back-to-back is quite difficult to achieve. So many good players and a mixture of those players who are fresh and ready to go and those players that are tired, and we tend to lean the way of the fresh players. So looking at the draw from top to bottom, you have Elena Rybakina at the top, number 1 seed, and Amanda Anisimova at bottom, number 2 seed. But I think all eyes will be on the first few rounds will be on Coco Gauff, the number 3 seed. And this is a player who really is good evidence of all the patterns of play I've spoken about in terms of a player that is really struggling at the moment in the modern game in 2026 to find her way. So last week, she lost first round to Coccaretto from Italy, who's a good player, who's beaten Pegula at Wimbledon. She's won tournaments at the 250 level, and she had a bizarre week because she was a lucky loser. She comes onto court, wins a match, gets the right to play Coco Gauff, who's had a bye, and 2 sets later, she's beaten Coco Gauff. And Coco Gauff really struggled to get ahead in any point.
I was hearing her in her socials. She was saying, "Sound like I just spent an entire time on Instagram watching tennis." Yeah, not too far away. She was saying she was very frustrated because what was working for her in her changing of her game and her practice play was not working for her on court, and that was the way she saw it.
Yeah, she's working with a long-established biomechanics coach who's worked with Karolina Sabalenka when she used to do a lot of double faulting on her serve. So she's gone through exactly the same chat, who's got proven track record, and she's helping to get help with her serve. And what she was saying was, in practice, there's no problem. Her serve as well. And I noticed it against Coccaretto. Believably, she lost her serve nearly 50% of the time. I mean, the score was 6-4, 6-2. So we're only talking 9 service games or thereabouts, and she lost 4 of them. But And Cocoretto has a good return game. She's a good baseline player, but she was taking advantage of the second serves. On the odd occasion, Coco Gauff won her serve. When she got to 30 love up in a game, she was serving first serves fluently, flat, with some power, and it looked no problem. But as soon as the score was 15-30, 30 all, game on a knife edge, or love 30 because she started the game badly, she just overthought, and she bounces the ball a bit like Djokovic, 6-7 bounces, and then she's going to spin the ball in so it's safer, so it's got a higher clearance over the net, comes over from a higher angle, hits the box and kicks in. And on occasion, you can see her brain thinking so much that she forgets herself almost and starts again. So she's bouncing again 6 or 7 times and then goes again. And then after she's thrown the ball toss up, she then catches it and goes again. So you actually watch her bounce the ball about 18 times.
She's actually practicing and not in a real match.
Yeah, and as any golfer knows, to go back to that game, if you're thinking through your swing as you're trying to hit the golf ball, it's a disaster. She's in that part of the process for me.
Partly it's psychological, and partly it's the process of changing an important part of your game.
Yes, I think for me, she should go away for 3 months, 4 months, but she can't. And that's the nature of this game. When people talk about tennis and tennis professionals and what a great life it must be, it's very much a conveyor belt. They're having to be machines, even though they're humans. And if they're not doing well on court, it doesn't mean they can just spend a week working on their game. They have all these other obligations, and they're being paid millions to endorse products, etc. So she's got too much going on, and she can't just focus on one thing, and it's affecting her game. And the players know her patterns of play. They know what she's going to do when her serve is struggling. They know it's going to be a spinny serve. They're getting on top of her, and she just can't. She can't dominate and get ahead in enough points. So it will be interesting. She seeded 3 in the draw. I'm just looking here at her path, but it will be interesting to see if she gets past her first match, which is the winner of Ostapenko and Kalinskaya. And that would be a good win for Gauff at the moment to get through that match. But I would be surprised if Coco Gauff does really well. But someday she will. She's a talented, very talented player. And when she gets her mojo back, for me, psychologically, for her to get her mojo back, she needs to beat one of the top players. So Gauff needs to beat Sabalenka or Rybakina or even Anisimova. She beats Iga Swiatek, but I think Iga Swiatek's her only real top 6 win for months. So got to watch out for Coco Gauff at the moment. Careful. Excitingly, Iva Jovic is back, and she has been resting up since her quarterfinal run for the Australian Open. So she's had 3 weeks off, 2.5 weeks off, certainly. And now she's coming in fresh. These conditions are perfect for her. She loves the hard court. She's young, confident, riding the crest of the wave. There's no Sabalenka to beat her in the draw. And she will be looking forward to her first match, which is against Sakkari, who's just had a great week, but probably tired. So the last match she would want is a youngster in flying form. So it'll be interesting to see if Jovic gets past her, but I expect her to go through and possibly play Pegula, who's playing this week. Interesting to see if she pushes Pegula, because Pegula was playing well, as we know, to get to the semi-finals in Australia. Loads of interesting matches. If you follow tennis and you can get...
if you don't follow tennis, you're listening to the wrong podcast.
Get in front of some matches. There are lots of good first round matches. Some of the youngsters we've spoken about on the podcast, Sarah Balick is back playing this week after having a rest. She's another youngster to watch out for. And Emma Raducanu, as we've mentioned, is playing, and she's got Cocoretto. So she's got a qualifier who's just beaten Coco Gauff.
Wow.
So not much rest for her. And if Emma Raducanu manages to beat the Italian, who's flying high at the moment, she's got Muchova, who's just won in Qatar. And if she manages to win that, she's got Rybakina. So it just shows you not that easy on the tour if you get a rough draw. And Raducanu's certainly got a tough draw this week. So my player to watch out for this week, I'm not going to go for the obvious, Sorana Castella.
Okay.
Won in Romania, had last week off, got a good hard court game. We know she just lost out to Osaka in Australia, but I'm going to be interested to see how far she goes. She's my player to watch this week in Dubai. Yeah, she did well last year, got to the quarterfinals, and no, not my player of the week, the player to watch this coming week.
Okay.
But yes, going to be a good event. But Kostya and Jovic, for me, are the players to watch coming ahead in Dubai. But yes, thank you for reminding me. We're going to finish with player of the week.
Player of the week. Drum roll is?
Well, we mentioned Sonay, didn't we, last week at 41. She was winning again in Qatar briefly, but her run came to an end in the main draw. But this week, at just under 30 years of age, as we've said, Karolina Muchova, one of many Czech tennis players who continues to succeed in the game and is now quite a lot richer, both in points and prize money, having won in Qatar and her first win for over 6 years. So that really is worthy of celebration.
Fantastic. She'll be riding the wave.
She will. So look out for her in the coming weeks. So what are you up to as we head off into the second half of February? Are you taking up paddle?
We will be playing paddle in Spain. We've been playing croquet, which is big sport in Spain, and we'll be playing paddle, and we'll have a bit of fun, maybe a little bit of tourism this week, if there's a moment doing tennis. But for now, thank you very much for coming in, listening, watching the pod. And any questions you've got, just pop them in the comments. If you love the show, tell your friends. And thank you very much for listening.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll see
you
next week.
Bye-bye.